We built that company to $10 million in sales in a year. Then eventually we just said, we don't want to be operating in a business where that's constantly going to be a constraint for us. And let's go apply that to something else. Time and time again, we were talking to moms about their postpartum hormonal skin journey, hormonal breakouts and melasma and hyperpigmentation, and ended up getting into the Sephora Accelerate program. And so we're a Y Combinator company. We did cold outreach her team. We literally emailed her. So we kind of caught her in this perfect moment. Anytime that she makes a media appearance and happens to talk about us, we see a bump in sales. We actually were able to achieve profitability by the end of last year, which is amazing.
Hi, Nisha. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and just for everyone, Nisha Phatak is it Phatak or Phatak?
Patak.
Okay, so Nisha Phatak is in San Francisco. She is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. She used to be part of an infant formula company and is now a co-founder of an incredible skincare company called Lion Pose. So welcome. I'm very excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And of course, I neglected to mention that you are a Harvard Business School graduate.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So Nisha, tell me, how do you go from business school to an infant formula company? Firstly, how does that happen? Because most people come out of business school and do like banking, and more banking for many years.
So here's the good part. I did the banking before business school, so I had already done it. I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do long term. It's not that I didn't enjoy it. I was always a quantitative person. My whole undergraduate, college experience was in quantitative stuff. I was a statistics major, so the numbers are always, in my blood. But I think finance itself, put me in a cubicle most of the day and not interacting with people face to face. And that's really the reason why I went to business school and sought out a degree to career switch into something else. Now, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And as I was graduating from HBS, I was being wooed into the tech world, especially because the tech industry is what I had covered when I was a financial analyst. So it kind of felt like a natural transition, to end up in the Bay Area. So being on the East Coast, actually, my entire life, it was my first time moving out to the San Francisco area back in 2015. And I started my post-business school career in tech. So I was at Box, which is the software, enterprise SaaS company. Then I went to Indiegogo, which is also a software company, but focused on crowdfunding. So I know Indiegogo is also available in India.
Yes.
There is a really cool kind of, I think at Indiegogo, I finally realized how excited I was about the potential of entrepreneurship because entrepreneurs were the ones who were crowdfunding on the platform, right? So I kind of got to interact with them by default. And they were really early stage entrepreneurs who were doing crowdfunding, right? The later stage entrepreneurs were raising from venture capitalists and stuff. So it was the first chance I got really understanding what early stage startup life would be like. And I was just very intrigued by it. I think I loved the idea of building something from nothing. And so when I was actually at an HBS reunion in San Francisco, there was kind of a, alumni thing happening here in the city. I ended up running into an old classmate of mine from business school named Madhu. And Madhu had actually she was about to start actually this baby formula company. And I wasn't a mom at the time, but she was. She had just had her daughter and she had just gone through a relatively rough time trying to found a company. She was kind of looking to find something around the same time that she had her daughter. She was, breastfeeding and pumping in Starbuckses and all sorts of shenanigans. And then when she was exploring the formula industry, she was realizing that so many of the US formulas just had really crappy ingredients in them. And she just really wanted to understand why that was the case and why, so many moms and parents in the US were choosing to import their formula from elsewhere. And so really the basis for the formula company started from her personal need to acquire infant formula and then evolved
As so
very
many
quickly.
entrepreneurial ventures do, actually.
Absolutely.
From a gap that you see in your own home or in your own sort of needs as a consumer.
Exactly. And then it very quickly turned into her saying, how can we get that infant formula, the really good ones from Europe and Australia and elsewhere here in the US? And she immediately, it was a bit of a supply chain problem in the beginning. And she was looking for someone to own the operations. It was very funny. So when we were talking about this, I was just getting excited about the concept. Again, not being a mom myself, I was just excited about bringing something cleaner to the US, something that we feed to babies. It's an easy thing to get behind. And I said, I would be interested in doing this role. And she said, do you have operations experience? I said, nope, but I'm willing to learn. And I think she immediately sensed from that I was just willing to get my hands dirty in anything and just figure it out. And so she was really excited about somebody like that joining the team at such an early stage. So I actually went to go work for Madhu first. We built that company to $10 million in sales in a year.
That's
We then started to
insane.
run. Yes, it was nuts. It just I think it was just this perfect combination of there was really high demand, the supply was really constrained, right? People just really were looking for a solution. They were willing to pay anything for it.
Mhm.
The trick with that industry was regulation. And so it's one of the most heavily regulated industries by the FDA in the United States. And so we ran into a lot of issues with the import and export of the formulas that we were working with. And eventually we just said, we don't want to be operating in a business where that's constantly going to be a constraint for us. And we're constantly going to be feeling like, we're not doing something properly or whatever. It just wasn't our expertise. So we basically said, we love what we're doing. We love working together, but let's go apply that to something
Mhm.
else. And so skincare was the next thing.
And that's how you pivoted to skincare. So I believe you actually interviewed moms because you were already sort of familiar with
Yeah.
others via formula and asked them
Yes,
for a gap, for the next gap and what their needs were. And they talked about this
absolutely.
hyperpigmentation and skin issues post delivery, right?
Absolutely. So what happened is that we had this amazing network of moms and parents that we were already selling the formula to. So you're totally right. We just went directly to them and said, we already have you all as customers. We want to build something else that's going to help you. If formula is not it, then what is? And
Mm.
we were very well expecting ourselves to end up in diapers or cribs or something else like very baby related and focused. But time and time again, we were talking to moms about their postpartum hormonal skin journey and the fact that they were battling things like hormonal breakouts and melasma and hyperpigmentation and it just was coming up so often that the two of us said this is a real thing. And then at the same time, Madhu was dealing it with herself, dealing with some of those issues herself as a postpartum mom.
Mm.
I was just starting to think about having kids myself, and even just the hormonal roller coaster of trying to conceive was causing a lot of skin issues for me.
Mm.
So I think it was just a combination of both of us also then experiencing it personally, where we were like, okay, everyone is sort of experiencing this in some way, shape, or form during this time. And this time doesn't just stop with one pregnancy, right? It goes on, honestly, for a couple of decades. And that sounds crazy to say, but those hormonal changes start, sure, with maybe trying to conceive and having your first kid, but then ends with maybe a second kid, maybe a third kid, perimenopause, menopause, and all
Yeah,
those
yeah. I mean, I'm
hormonal
almost 50 and
fluctuations.
my skin is doing stuff that um, I never thought it could do, you know?
Yeah, and you don't
Yeah.
expect it, right? I mean, everyone talks about teenage acne and the hormones that happen at that time. Why are they not also talking about the hormones that happen the second half of your life? And
Yeah.
so that's really where we said,
Because
okay,
women are
there's
not rendered important post 30. So,
correct, correct, correct. And so
yeah.
we said same in the skincare space, right? So that's exactly where we saw an opportunity is we said, I think everybody who launches a skincare company wants to go after the Gen Zers and sometimes the Gen Alpha buyer as well, right? And we said, no, we don't need to go after that audience. We would love to go after millennials plus, right? Millennials, Gen X, and
Also
even
the
boomers. And
affording
we
audience in a sense, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. So that is exactly where we've found our niche. And it's been really incredible serving that audience because that audience just does not have the same specific issues as a younger audience does with their skin. And so the problem areas that we're solving for are going to be unique to our demographic that we're selling to.
So I love the name line pose. I mean, it's just genius. It's so unique and it's rooted in an old yoga pose. So I've been doing yoga
Yes,
my whole life, and this really resonated with me because yoga overall has such a rejuvenating impact on your body
yes.
and your skin. So to name it that is quite genius. And also from ideation to launch, how long did it take? What was that journey, Nisha?
So we were pivoting out of the formula space in summer 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, summer 2021. And so that's really when we started stumbling upon the skincare space as one that we thought was interesting when we were doing all those customer interviews. And so I remember though, for that whole second half of 2021, a lot of it was what is that first product we want to create, right? Because so much comes down to that first launch, that first, like what we put out there in the world first is what people are going to remember us by. And that ended up being our unspotted serum. So that's the dark
Went
spot
viral.
serum that we
Yeah.
created. And I think it was very intentional for us to choose a treatment product first, right? Because we said, anybody can make a moisturizer, anybody can make a cleanser, anybody can make even a sunscreen. It is more challenging to make a sunscreen, but there is a formula for it, right? And there's not a ton out there. Like a sunscreen is a sunscreen is a sunscreen at the end of the day. Sure, there's chemical, there's mineral, and all of that, but at the end of the day, it's doing one thing, right? For us, the serum was so unique because again, it was tackling this older demographic. It was tackling very specifically hormonal cystic acne and the scars and spots left by it, right? And we wanted to create this mix of ingredients that was truly unique, that wasn't found in any other treatment product out there. And that's really what we did first. So actually, Madhu and I are not dermatologists. The first thing that we thought to ourselves is if we're going to create a treatment and literally call it a treatment,
Mm.
in the medical sense, that we needed medical expertise to come
Yes.
onto this brand very early. And so the first people that we brought on were the dermatologists, actually, who joined our medical board and then started to advise us on what ingredients to put in this product, at what concentrations. And then we started working with a lab to actually start putting some of those ingredients together and see how it felt. We went through a lot of focus groups and rounds of testing, even with the early versions of the product. So there were definitely versions of the product that were a little bit stingy and burny, and we're like, okay, we can't do that, right? We had to scale back on some things. We had to amp other things up. There were probably 10 to 12 versions of this serum before we actually said, this is good enough to bring to market. And the very cool thing about this process is that we also, in the middle of this, and I think it was fall 2021, ended up getting into the Sephora Accelerate program. And so it was sort of this beautiful combination of things where we had this really early version of the product, we had the dermatologists on board, and then we now had Sephora as an amazing retail partner well before any launch at all, telling us, this is going to sell really well or this is not. And so the feedback that we were getting from the derms, from Sephora, and from our own research really all went into building Unspotted from the beginning. So the first year, honestly, was just that.
So you think you got into the Accelerate program because of your success in infant formula?
That was definitely part of it. I mean, so much of a lot of these accelerator programs are bets that they're making on us as a team, right? So
Yeah.
no matter what industry that we had operated in, they just wanted to know that we had the ability as a team to build it something that was successful, right?
I love this
Yeah.
about America. The
It's great. I mean,
opportunities
that's really what it is. I
that,
mean, the funny thing is, we're a Y Combinator company too. That was even earlier for us. We actually went through Y Combinator with the infant formula company, and then when we pivoted to skincare, they were all for it. They were just like, "Great! If infant formula is not working, do something else." And so they were our first investors, and they were completely on board with the pivot. And I think that's the truth of the matter is that every time we brought up this pivot or we made a big decision for the company that wasn't, the decision that we started with, all of our investors, everyone that we have on our cap table has always been about like, we invested in you, we invested in the two of you building this together. And at the end of the day, we trust you to make those big pivots and big decisions, no matter where it takes you. So that's the cool part. And I think Sephora honestly felt the same way. The second thing though with Sephora is that they had this amazing, and they still do have this amazing value as a company of wanting to bring more diverse founders and brands into the mix. So that is also something that was part of the accelerator when we went through it, is that every founder that got accepted to that accelerator program was a founder of color themselves. So that was amazing to be in that network of people and also understand why these other founders were building the brands that they were building too, and how we were thinking about differentiating ourselves once we actually get to the Sephora shelf. So it really ended up being probably one of the best networks that we have. And some of our best founder friends still have come out of that accelerator class and are doing some things that are very directly competitive to us and some things that aren't, right? Like the
yeah.
founders of Shaz and Kicks are in hair care, and we share almost everything with each other because we're not directly competitive, and we literally can, very honestly talk about exactly what metrics and what channels and what tactics are working for each of us. So that's incredible.
Yeah. You've also had third-party testing, which I believe is done in China.
So no, so we get a lot of our packaging is imported from abroad, though not specifically all from China. We definitely import from South Korea as well, and we've looked at other countries to import the actual packaging from. So I'm talking like the plastics, right? The bottles, the plastics, the glass, all of that. Everything else, goop and later, so goop basically being literally the goo going inside the bottles, that is all formulated in the US and all the clinical testing is done in the US too. So everything basically from packaging arriving to the border is all US onwards.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say that's been so intentional. I don't think we're opposed to manufacturing even the goop abroad. It's more just that, it's been a lot easier for us, especially when we're working with a lab or we're working with a new lab or new scientist, right, or chemist that's working on our products, to be able to go in person and kind of trial and error with them, especially when we're developing something new. And so obviously having them in the US, it just makes it easier for us to make those kinds of
Makes
trips
sense.
and do that kind of
Makes
R&D
sense.
like in the kitchen with them.
When you say that you've tested this product on all skin types, because that's something you say, right? What
Yes.
does that mean?
Yes, so dermatologists actually bucket all different people into six what they call Fitzpatrick skin tones. That's, scientifically how they essentially delineate and also diagnose different patients that come into their office for different skin issues. So it is 1 through 6.
Mm.
There's actually full spectrums online with imagery and descriptions that kind of tell you which of those categories, like how they're broken down. But as a visual example, I am probably a Fitzpatrick 2 to 3, somewhere in
Okay.
there. So that's literally what they're taught in medical school, right? From our standpoint, we said no matter what product we build, not only are we going to test it in a third party lab and do true clinical testing, not just consumer surveys. You'd be surprised how many brands just do consumer surveys, right? They'll send a
Yeah.
survey out to people and say, how did you like it? How did you not like it? What would you do? Um, we said no, we want to use actual tools and we want to test on enough people where we're getting statistically significant results. This is where my stats background comes, right, full circle, right? And we want to make sure that all six of those Fitzpatrick skin tones and types are represented in that pool of people that we're testing on. That's really what it comes down to. And that commitment of ours has been true for every single product that we've launched. And it's not an easy commitment to make. At the end of the day, it does come with cost. And in the US, just the ability to recruit all Fitzpatrick skin tones into the study, right? And then all the testing and tools required to do true clinical testing versus consumer perception or survey studies, right, is probably upwards of $50,000 to $60,000 per product.
Wow.
So as a business, that's a big hefty price to pay. And you'd be surprised, even the larger companies opt to not go through that process, again, because of the cost. So for us to just put a stake in the ground and say, we are going to do this for every product was pretty revolutionary at the time. There
Yeah.
definitely are other brands that have since done that at this point and have been more adamant about it and about talking about it as well. And honestly, we're happy about that. For us, it was always about raising the standard of the whole industry and saying more people should be doing this. More people
Yeah.
should be clinically testing everything and clinically testing across all skin tones. So for us, we're like, hey, if people copy, we're here for it. What
Yeah.
do they say? Copying is the truest form of flattery or something like that. I don't know.
Imitation is the truest form of
There
flattery.
we go. There we
Yes, yes,
go.
yes, absolutely.
So we
Okay,
said,
so
great,
now
we're convinced.
your see, you talk about obviously your dermatologists. You say they're Harvard educated dermatologists, right? Um,
Yes.
that's important to your storytelling. I mean, it's authentic, but it obviously makes an impact.
I think so much of it for us again came down to how do we bring the credibility in this industry where the two of us have never operated, right?
Yeah.
We obviously have the business know-how. We come from the degree, we did the formula thing, we've worked in other companies. Madhu actually came from a very strong advertising background, right? She worked at Facebook, she worked at Pinterest. So there we had our expertise in other areas, but skincare specifically,
Yeah,
it really came down to the dermatologist kind of bringing that
absolutely.
credibility for us. So
Absolutely.
leaning into their degrees and their universities and their pedigree definitely was a strategy of ours to say, how do we portray that expertise that we clearly have spent time and energy putting into the products to everybody in a way where it didn't seem like the two of us as founders had just, cooked something up in our kitchen, because we didn't want anybody to feel that way. And it's different because I think it depends on the brand that you're creating, right? At the end of the day, if it's not a brand that, we were to call super clinical or, again, a product that we're calling a treatment, it would have been a different story, right? If we just made a really nice smelling moisturizer or something like that, it wouldn't have mattered as much. But because we were making something that was so rooted in its promise of delivering real results, we said we have to, not only lean into this story, but live and breathe it truthfully every single day.
Yeah. Your acid jelly unspotted night serum.
It's a mouthful.
Four times, right? Like 4x.
Yeah.
So, Percy, the name is so specific and it's so self-explanatory. It's honestly, your names have been genius, whether it's Lion Pose, Unspotted, Unghosted, Pep
Thank
Talk,
you.
they're really buzzy and they really, the name says it all. Now, that was an insanely breakthrough product. I know you got awards for it. I know that you got Mindy Kaling on board after you launched that product, right? Because she tried it
Yes.
herself. But what is, in layman's terms, what is the composition of that product?
Yes. So the 4X part of the name is the four active acids that are in the product. So we named it that way to tout that there were four unique acids. So there's glycolic and lactic acids, which are your traditional AHAs. I think a lot of people, if you are skincare aficionados, you've probably looked for or tried to buy AHA serums in the
Yeah.
past. And then the two additional acids that we added in are azelaic and tranexamic acid. So those two acids actually, when we launched Unspotted, were very, they were relatively new to the scene. Like I wouldn't say they were in a ton of products. And so those were really the two, I think, that a lot of people saw this and said, oh, that's different.
Yeah.
Glycolic and lactic are kind of tried and true, right? The AHAs and what people look for in an AHA serum is really the exfoliation. The glycolic and lactic acids are literally helping your skin exfoliate faster, essentially turn over faster,
Mm.
right? They say that, the skin cycle is kind of every 30 days, right? You kind of have like a fresh skin cycle. Like you're losing skin cells very regularly all day, every day. Like that's what you kind of need to think about, right? And then the cells underneath are coming up to the surface, right? And so there's this kind of cycle that's happening on your skin. And the glycolic and lactic acid is kind of making that cycle happen a little bit faster. So if you have a scar or a spot or melasma or a dark patch, right, that you're trying to get rid of, then having that cycle operate faster is just bringing that new fresh skin faster up to the surface, right? Which is what's causing that spot to go away. Now, that's great, but that's not solving the underlying issue of why the spots and dark patches are coming in the first place. So we said we need to get something in there that's actually preventing the dark spots and scarring from happening. And what those are basically something called, and again, you'd said layman terms, but I have to throw one scientific term in,
Of
which
course.
is tyrosinase inhibitors. Tyrosinase is basically what's causing the melanin overproduction to happen when
Mm.
something is irritated, either because of sun damage or what have you, right? Something has irritated your skin, it's caused that overproduction. Hormones can cause it as well. And the tyrosinase can be inhibited by these other ingredients, azelaic acid and tranexamic acid, and that actually prevents a lot of the spots from actually coming to begin with. So if you're using our unspotted 4X serum, you're both preventing
Mm.
and exfoliating the existing spots away. So it's kind of a double whammy, right?
Mm.
That's where we really got excited about bringing this product to market because we didn't just want to fade the spots that were already there. We wanted to actually prevent them from coming.
Amazing. So when you launched, you didn't expect this response, surely.
It was definitely I remember those first couple of weeks we were just looking at the sales numbers and we were like, whoa, it
If
felt
I can ask just for that
incredible.
product, what have the sales hit? Or you don't share this?
I wouldn't share it, but I can at least share that it has continued to be the best seller to date. Even with other product launches,
Yeah.
it is by far our number one seller, and I think always will be. It really is the hero.
Yeah. And this is, like we said, brought Mindy Kaling on board for this product, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's a real pinch me moment, right?
it was incredible.
She's a role model for so many South
Yeah.
Asian women, not just in America, but all over the world today. Now,
She's an icon. She's an icon.
what
Like
was that
incredible.
conversation like? Did you approach her, or did she use it and try and find you? What is her role
We
in
did
the company? Does she even sort of contribute, give input, suggestions? She
Yeah,
seems
so
as type A as you guys.
she is. She is. I mean, she's so smart, right? She went to Dartmouth. She's an incredible writer. She now produces. She does everything. She's acted, produced, written.
Yeah.
She's just an incredible powerhouse herself. And so I think it's interesting. When we were starting the brand, it was always kind of in the back of our minds, the thought of having a celebrity involved in some way, shape, or form. It definitely was something that had already been done. It
Yes.
wasn't
For
something so
skincare, for
revolutionary to us.
everything. Yeah.
Totally, exactly. So it had definitely been done before and it had been done even more recently, right? And with people kind of even in our generation, right? Like with Rihanna and everything and Fenty and all of that. And there was so many great data points from that I think the concept of that intrigued us a lot. I think the thing that made us very intentional about who we might want to bring on was this clinical aspect of it, right? Is that we said, okay, if we have someone who's going to be out there essentially as a spokesperson for the brand, even on as an investor, they need to also come with their own level of credibility and trust. And not all celebrities have that, right? And so there was a very, I'd say, curated ideation that happened between Madhu and I of who would be that ideal fit for the brand. And I'd
Mm.
be lying if I didn't say that, if I said that, Mindy wasn't at the top of the list. She absolutely was. I mean, she was sort of the ideal candidate for us because again, she already had that credibility. She already had that authority in everything else that she was doing. And on top of that, people were, looking at her posts, her photos and saying, tell us your skincare routine. We want to know. And so it's something that I think people already looked up to her for, and we knew immediately that she was going to have the type of authority to be able to recommend products in this space, and people wouldn't say, oh, like, who is she to be recommending me a serum, right?
Correct.
And so for us, that natural fit was there. We did reach out to her team. Again, it was so intentional for us that we wanted to do something like this. Was it sort of a necessity? No. Like I think if we had not found the right person, we wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But we did cold outreach her team. We literally emailed her, and someone of her caliber comes with a manager and an agent and a legal team and all of that, right? And so we had gotten the contact, I want to say, of her agent, and we did literally send a cold email. And I remember he responded relatively quickly. And I honestly need to like find that email and frame it or something. I don't know what we said that convinced them so quickly to take the call. But honestly, I think it was a bit of a timing thing, as so many of these things are. She was not already working with any beauty brand. I think that was huge, right? I mean, someone of her caliber not being associated even with a big L'Oreal or Neutrogena or something like that, right? Was pretty remarkable.
Mm.
So we kind of caught her in this perfect moment. And I think also coming in with the story of wanting to test on all skin tones, wanting to create a brand that everybody could see themselves in, right? I think all of that really resonated with her own value set, her own brand, and the types of even content she was putting out there in the universe. She had just launched Never Have I Ever, right? Which is one of her biggest hits on Netflix.
Yes.
And we could kind of just see that she was about to, I mean, she already was sort of this at the peak kind of person, right, in her career. But I think what was so specific about her at that time was she was like there and ready to stay. You know what I mean? And we knew that she was only going to churn out more incredible shows, one after another. And she has since. And I think, it's kept her so incredibly relevant, exciting, and such a wonderful person to have as part of the brand. Time and time again, just every time she posts so authentically about using the products, prepping her skin for big moments like the Oscars and Met Gala and things like that, people see the authenticity in how much she loves the products and truly uses them. And at the end of the day, that's really, what matters for us for sales and everything else. So it ended up being such a wonderful partnership.
Amazing. Have you seen a real impact on your sales?
Yeah, I would be lying if I said no. It's been incredible, to be honest. And we continue to. Every time she posts, we see a bump in sales. Anytime that she makes a media appearance and happens to talk about us, we see a bump in sales. It's very measurable. It's really remarkable to see the direct impact that she has. Again, I think it's because we picked someone who really does have authority, right? I don't think anybody would have necessarily had that same impact that she has. I
Yes.
think people want to know what she's buying. And it's not just for skincare, right? I think she's become a huge fashion icon in the US as well, and everywhere, frankly, globally. And so I think it extends beyond, right? And I think that actually works in our advantage where she's not just out there recommending lie impose products. She's out there talking about what she's wearing. She's out there talking about what she's reading, right? I think it's just that she truly is a person of influence at the end of the day, right? People want to know what she's doing, what she's wearing, what she's reading, what she's thinking, and they're thrilled to go do and think and eat and read those same things, right? So I think that's just who she is, and she's built just such an amazing reputation that way. So for us, it really does pay off.
So tell me, when someone like that comes on board, yes, she is a South Asian figure, right? Um,
Yes.
in that sense, she is a South Asian figure. While she has overall influence across the entertainment industry, and she is by far one of the most influential people in the entertainment industry today. Does that sort of shift your audience, or sort of attract an audience that is more South Asian in nature, or how does it work?
We thought that it would more than I'd say it has in reality. So, what I would say is our initial audience at launch likely did skew pretty South Asian, like in comparison to the actual South Asian percentage of the US population, right? Our
Mhm.
percentage of South Asians buying the products in the beginning was definitely higher than the average. I think over time, what has happened it's impossible to not notice that both founders and Mindy Kaling are all South Asian. It would be strange for someone to just not put two and two together. At the same time, I think there's a few reasons why it's kind of gone beyond. One is the dermatologists that are on our medical board span all different ethnicities, right? Sephora purchasers and Sephora going out there, obviously doing their own co-branding and stuff and co-marketing with us they're their own entity and they sell it to a completely diverse US audience, right? The same way that when we were, sending salespeople into Sephora or doing marketing campaigns, hiring different models, all that stuff for all the different photo shoots, we intentionally chose a very diverse set of individuals for all those different things because we wanted to extend beyond. So for us, it really came down to, again, the problem that we were trying to solve. That was at the top of the list, right? Is that we want to solve for this hormonal hyperpigmentation issue. That does tend to skew more heavily towards people of color. So that is actually one thing that did very much kind of, if we're making a Venn diagram here, there's
Yeah.
the South Asian aspect of our brand, right? And then there's the hyperpigmentation aspect of our brand. And there is overlap there. There's a significant overlap there, which is that if you have medium to deep skin tone, you are much more likely to see hyperpigmentation than if you don't. So there was a natural overlap there, but it didn't necessarily have to just be South Asians that were seeing the solution to this problem. We absolutely have resonated with East Asians, with African Americans, with, Hispanic. There's just been so much overlap. And frankly, I can actually share and I'd love to share that I think roughly 50% of our purchasing audience still identifies as Caucasian. And so that audience is still there too. And at the end of the day, again, it's really about the problem solution and less about, specifically creating a product for a very particular audience. And I think our customers have seen that, and resonate with that concept.
That's interesting. You have other products as well. You have
Yes.
your hydrating moisturizer, you have your sunscreen. You also sell some of these products in bundles, like you call them a placenta facial. So basically, you have three products. Your star product
Mhm.
is your acid jelly, the night serum.
Yep.
Then you have your
Yep.
moisturizer, and you have your sunscreen.
And
And
then every permutation of those in every bundle known to mankind.
And then you also call them the placenta facial. I was like, that's cheeky because you're almost kind of saying you don't need the treatments that you get in a derma clinic, like your
Yeah.
lasers, like your abrasions, like all of that. And you need our products instead. How do you even back that up?
It's really funny. We were actually really worried when we first went out with that kind of message, right? Where we were
Yeah.
basically saying, like, you don't need the derm office visit, right? You don't need to go
Yeah.
to a dermatologist. We're like, oh man, we're really gonna like piss off our dermatologist because, we're gonna say all this stuff and basically be like, we don't need you, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing about it is that they were all so on board with that message and we were so shocked. And the reason behind it is that there are such limited amount of dermatologists in the US. nobody, like, not everybody can just go see a dermatologist, right? One, it's expensive. Two, there are just not that many of them. So
Yeah.
the accessibility is not there, both from a financial standpoint of getting these crazy treatments that typically cost hundreds of dollars, right? And then on top of that, just physically being able to make an appointment is sometimes a tedious task. I know there's people who literally wait 4 to 6 months for their dermatologist appointment sometimes, which is just crazy. They're just backed up for months and months. So a lot of it came out of even our dermatologists saying, we can't treat everyone if we wanted to, you know? Like this is just impossible for us to treat everybody who wants to be treated. And so, both financially and just access wise, it just made sense for this type of product to exist. So honestly, a lot of the dermatologists that we work with also have a pretty heavy social media presence themselves, right? I think in the US they call them dermfluencers.
Wow.
So yeah, which is interesting. So a lot of I mean, some of the derms we work with have 100,000 up to 1 million followers. And so they've built a very significant presence online, recommending a lot of these retail sold products like ours. And they've told me this specifically. They've been thrilled to be able to use their expertise to treat, quote unquote, I say treat in quotes because obviously they can't be like giving medical advice to all our customers, but basically treat customers beyond the patients that they see in their office every day. That actually brings them lots of joy. It doesn't take away from what they do in their office. It actually just allows them to do it at a larger scale. So that's really what it comes down to. And it really excites them, that people who normally wouldn't be able to access their services are able to do it through our products, which is great.
So tell me about packaging, right? Like
Yeah,
even your packaging, those block colors, beautiful, vibrant colors. I mean, what kind of market research goes into that when you're launching a product? Like, are all these sort of factors important?
so I mean, I have to say that everything that we did was very intentional.
Yeah.
It definitely, to have a clinical brand that didn't look like every other clinical brand, right? I mean, when you think of a clinical skincare brand, you think of white bottle, black font, something that would sit in a, medical spa or dermatologist office, right? It doesn't look like this. Like this,
Yeah, it
this is
really
not what
doesn't.
people,
This is
this is
like
not what people
joy
are
and
expecting.
sunshine and hope, you know?
Yeah. So for us, it really was about making the clinical brand that people didn't find boring, right? That people wanted to keep on their vanity out in the open, that they weren't keeping, behind a cabinet door. And so really it inspired us to create just beautiful bottles that people wanted to look at and use every single day and reinvent the meaning of a clinical skincare brand to not just be those drab bottles that we're all very used to seeing. So much of it really was like, let's create something new. We're doing something new here, so let's make it look new as well.
Also, having a distribution partner, a channel like Sephora, it's game changing for skincare, for a cosmetic brand.
For
But at
sure.
the end of the day, you are sort of fighting for shelf space every day, right?
Oh yeah.
If they do encourage new talent and promising brands, they're doing that to many people in every day. And my
Yep,
second question to that
absolutely.
is also, I see a lot more South Asian entrepreneurs on their shelves now. And why do you think that's happening now?
I mean, so much of it is them wanting to keep things fresh and really cater and adapt to, the ever evolving audience and demographic that's shopping in their stores. And so, I think they were smart to realize, however many years ago when they started to bring on more diverse founders, more diverse brands, that their customer base is extremely diverse, right? The people shopping in their stores are not just one thing. They're looking for products that are extremely unique to each and every skin tone, skin type, skin color, ethnicity. So, and the US as a purchasing demographic inherently is extremely diverse. So, from their
Does
point
Trump
of
know that?
view, it's hard to tell. It's hard
Yeah.
to tell, but Sephora knows. So they I think just made such a smart choice, frankly, to start looking beyond a lot of the legacy brands that had been there forever and really start to bring some new fresh faces in. As to why so many South Asians, I think just because we're smart. That's really what it is. I mean, honestly, when I talk to other South Asian founders, so much of it really does come from watching our parents as immigrants come here and build something for themselves from many times, very limited means. And so obviously that's not everyone's story, but it certainly is a lot of people's stories. And it definitely was for my parents too. I wouldn't say my parents came here, with a significant amount of wealth, but they really created a wonderful life for themselves and a wonderful life for us as their kids. And I think seeing that hustle just makes us more prone to want to put that level of hustle into everything that we do. And so I think there's downsides to it too. I think in general, at least the South Asian American diaspora does tend to have parents who are relatively low risk takers. So I do think there are things that hold us back as entrepreneurs too, being South Asian. And I think a lot of that is, and I think this is very similar, I'm assuming in India and the US as well, is that there's sort of an expectation of like, these lower risk paths like becoming a doctor, becoming an engineer, becoming, just something that has a little bit more of a sure outcome tends to be where we're pushed, right, when we're younger. And so to take something like this on, I definitely would say through my parents a little bit. They were like, "What? You're doing what now?"
Yeah.
And I think,
You went to
but I
HBS
think
and
the
did what now?
hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what's going on here? But I think the hustle definitely comes from our parents as well. And so I think what they've seen me able to do in, just 5 years since we thought about this idea is, I think, a huge testament still to what they ingrained in us as kids, which is that, by whatever means, we will figure things out, we will persevere, we will keep pushing forward. And so I think that's something that we do all have in common. And so I think that's just why we're seeing, a lot more South Asian founders in not only the beauty cosmetic space, but elsewhere as well.
But obviously, the aim would be to increase your shelf space at places like Sephora, and you hope that's going to
Of
happen
course.
soon enough.
Of course, yes. And
Yeah.
it is a challenge. I mean, being one of many, many, many brands in the store, right? I mean, the same goes for Sephora in India, Nykaa in India,
Yeah.
is that there's always going to be another rising star brand that's coming right behind you, right? So at the end of the day, you have to not only prove yourself at launch, and I know we talked about, the amazing success we had when we launched, but the sustaining of those sales and the sustaining of the brand, longevity over time is its own challenge. And I will say that that did not come sort of inherently to us. It hasn't just been a walk in the park. We've definitely had to, talk to other founders who've been around longer than we have, understand what's worked for them in continuing the momentum, 1, 2, 3 years after our launch has already happened to really understand what's going to keep this thing going. So I think there's a lot of learning still left to be had. We're only 3 years post launch right now. So, to do it another 5 years, that's going to take even more learning day in and day out of what others have done that has worked.
On that note, how do you build a brand in today's marketplace? I feel like everyone's thought of everything.
I
So
know. And
every
I will
marketing
definitely say,
and also how important. I'm seeing people actually build brands on platforms like TikTok.
yeah, here's the interesting thing. Here's my honest take. If there was a true playbook, then everybody would be doing it. And then everyone would be successful, but also no one would be successful, right? Because everybody can't do everything exactly correct. So I think the variance actually comes from the demographic that you're selling to. Because, for example, our brand catering to a 40 plus audience, yes, it is a very growing audience on TikTok. Is it primarily on TikTok or is it still primarily on Meta? It's primarily on Meta. It
Mhm.
truthfully is. So our audience is still, and it doesn't mean that we're not on TikTok, right? It just means that from a sales perspective and where we go to discover new brands and figure out what we want to buy is still primarily on Meta. So it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, it's less on TikTok. So I think what's interesting is that the TikTok playbook that might have worked for a brand that, let's say, the average price point is less than 30 US dollars, they're catering to a younger audience, and they're just, they're selling a different thing, even in a different category. It might still be beauty though, catering to a younger audience or having a lower price point might do incredibly well on TikTok. We've never really seen a ton of success on TikTok. It doesn't mean that we don't do it. We absolutely still work with creators. It still works as a really amazing brand awareness channel for us, but the sales driving is happening in Meta ads for us.
Also, as you said,
And
it's a
so
40
I
plus audience, right? For the most part, or
exactly,
at least 35
exactly.
plus.
Yeah, so that's where I think the misconception is that it's really easy to sometimes see what other brands are doing and say, "Oh my gosh, we have to go do that too." But to really understand if that's a good fit for our brand and our customer base is really kind of up to us. Now, we can look at other lookalike companies and try to figure out obviously what's working for them might work for us, and that's kind of how we've done it the last year or so. And a lot of the time, like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily be exactly another clinical skincare company selling to a 40 plus audience. It could be a company, for example, that's doing hair loss or hair care for perimenopause and menopausal customers, right? That would be a very aligned audience with ours and seeing where they're advertising, what kinds of messages are working for them. And so a lot of the time we're learning from people who are sort of tangentially related to us, not, a direct sort of competitor of what we're doing. So that's how we continue to kind of learn and evolve over time and what we've figured out works for us.
So your channels, how do you sell the most, Nisha? Like, where do you see the most success? One is obviously Sephora.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely Sephora, definitely
Yeah.
our own website.
Mm.
So, and I'll say that's very typical, I'd say, especially of brands in the US, is that so much of that data that you get
Mm.
from Facebook and from your own site, and we're on Shopify, most brands are as well. So what you get kind of from, your web hosting company, from your advertising companies and all of that, and what you're able to put together on the metric side is really robust for your own website. So where you're going to be able to iterate and double down the most is your own site. The challenge with a Sephora and with any other retailer is that a lot of your customers are gonna buy from there because it's the reliable place to buy, right? I think when people are buying from a random website, they just don't know if it's real these days, like
Yeah,
there's definitely like a
absolutely.
trust issue
Yeah,
with a brand that's
absolutely.
smaller.
Which is why you have to forego those margins, and you have to
Yes,
forego those big gains that you would have in terms of
correct.
on a shelf in Sephora,
Yes.
because that gives you that credibility and push.
Immediate credibility. Yes, you're
And also,
exactly right.
you're not a cheap product. I mean, not that any skincare product is a cheap product,
Correct.
but you're definitely
Correct.
positioned on the premium end, right? Like, what would your
Correct.
acid jelly be? Was it almost 80, $90?
Yeah, it's $79. Yeah, it's almost
Yeah,
$80. So
yeah.
yeah, it's an expensive product. It's definitely not low cost or, quote unquote affordable in the sense of the word, within the beauty space. And so you're absolutely right, is that Sephora as a channel gives us that credibility and that trust factor. But the amount of data we get on our own website, and especially selling to customers who, let's say, are buying the second, third, fourth time, they already know, right? They know about us, they know the products, they want to come back and get more. We can oftentimes capture them through our own site because at that point they're already a customer, right? And we can retarget them with things like emails and retargeting ads and stuff like that in a way where we just don't get the same level of data at Sephora, right? I don't know if someone bought at Sephora. I
Yeah.
know how many sales we did at Sephora, but I don't know who they are. I don't know who
Mm.
bought, right? What their demographic is, what convinced them to buy. We know all of that on our website, so it makes it a lot easier to
And now
to
AI has
keep
made that so much easier, right?
yes. It's been incredible. And honestly, there's like a new AI software that launches every week. So just keeping up with what's out there available for us to use, I think is honestly the more daunting thing than trying to incorporate. It's like I want to incorporate everything in the business, right? I want to incorporate a software that's using AI on the finance side, one that's using it on the operations side, one that's using it on the advertising side. But it's just the ability to keep up with what all's out there and try to implement every single one of those softwares, on a weekly basis is a lot. So really it's just the filtering through and understanding which one is worthwhile, implementing today versus, what could we implement 2, 3 months from now, I think that's the challenge these days.
Amazing. The world we're living in at this point is just amazing. You
Yeah,
know,
it's wild.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's scary when you think of AI and what it can do to jobs, but at this point, it's also feeling like it can really help entrepreneurs and business
I
owners
was just gonna say,
augment their business.
yes,
Even from a content perspective, I can see what it's doing for me, right?
I
Um,
will say
it
it
just
has
helps me push
really,
forward with so much
yes.
reliable information on some level and more efficient way of acquiring it. I really get it, you know.
I think it's leveling the playing field. That's really what it is that there's so many things that otherwise small companies, I think, would have a really hard time doing. And yes, customer research is one of them. Product and ingredient research is one of them. There's just so much that now we're able to do so much faster. It allows us to stay at the same speed as an Estee Lauder, right? Which is crazy. It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Speaking of Estee Lauder, I mean, you have uh, real competitors who've been doing this for many years, right? Um, I mean, all the top names in some form or the other
Yes.
in
Yeah,
with
for
what you're
sure.
doing. But you would say your differentiator is that people of all skin tones can can benefit from this product.
Yes, absolutely.
Would
I
you
mean,
say that?
that's at the core. Yeah, that's at the core what we chose to do, right? Is
Yeah.
we said because of our clinical testing, anybody, can look at these products and say it was tested on someone who looks like me. At the other aspect of it, of course, is just the unique kind of science and research that went into the ingredients we chose and the problem area we decided to solution around, right? Because
Mm.
at the end of the day, I think I touched upon this before, is that hyperpigmentation and melasma issue does tend to skew more towards people of color, right? And
Correct.
so a lot of the time, the Estes and the L'Oreals and such haven't necessarily prioritized that problem set as much as they've prioritized other skin issues, for example, that might more heavily skew Caucasian, right? And so really it came out of both the issue we were trying to solve, but then also the way we were doing our testing.
You don't position yourself as a South Asian brand. You position yourself as a skincare and a treatment brand. But because of
Mhm.
the issues you address, it kind of skews towards South Asian women and Hispanic and sort of darker colored skin
Correct.
women
It
buying
can
it. Okay.
skew.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. It just skews more towards medium to deeper skin tones, whatever ethnicity that may be, right? But
Yeah.
that's such a huge portion of the US population. So I think
Yeah.
that's really where we've said, okay, that's significant, right? That's
Yeah.
significant enough to have an enormous market opportunity. And
Yeah.
so it's an easy group of people to get behind.
Yeah. So, the startup culture isn't new in India as well, right? There's been a
Yes.
booming startup culture over the last 5 years, 7 years, even in the US, obviously, in Silicon Valley. But many, many startups have gone bust, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been serious cash burn in the growth phase,
Yeah.
etc. Many have IPO'd and now are basically duds in terms of valuations. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you ensure that doesn't happen to you? Like, do you have a sort of hybrid model where even profitability now is a sort of very important factor in your company rather
Yes.
than just growth?
Yes, that changed a lot for us over the last year. So about a year ago, you both Madhu and I said we need to focus on profitability
Mhm.
first if we want to have full control over the longevity of this business, right? We were realizing that the money we had raised back in, we've only done one raise. It was back in fall of 2022. So we're, almost 4 years past that raise at this point. And so last year, we were 3 years past that raise and we were just thinking, it's either we focus on profitability or we have to go raise again. And on what metrics, right? And does it make sense to raise right now? And last year was a pretty challenging year for the beauty industry in terms of valuations as well. So we said, do we want to raise in a year where valuations are not super strong? And it really came down to no, we did not. And so the only other option was to focus on profitability. And I'm so glad that we were sort of forced in that direction last year because not only has the venture capital industry now changed to be more focused on profitability than they used to be, it's just allowed us to choose our own destiny now. It's incredible. So we actually were able to achieve profitability by the end of last year, which is amazing. And we've been
Congratulations.
able to
That's
continue
quite
that.
quick
Thank
for a
you.
startup.
Thank you. It
Yeah.
is. And so there's pros and cons to it, right? I mean, I love to say, oh, we achieve profitability. At the same time, we're still very hand to mouth, right? We're not sitting over here minting cash. Everything that
Yeah.
we make, we
You're
put right
bootstrapped.
back
I
into
mean,
the business. Yeah, absolutely. And every, dollar of profit goes right back into R&D for the next product, right? So I think at the end of the day, it still does throttle our ability to grow. So that's how I think about the next round is, at some point we will need to raise another round, not because we're running out of cash, but because we simply want to grow faster. That's really what it is.
yeah.
And we want to be able to kind of hit that hockey stick growth level that just unfortunately takes another cash injection to do.
Mm.
So as much though as we can basically hold off on that raise though until we have a higher top line revenue number to show the higher valuation we're going to get when we do that raise, right? So that's really what the name of the game has been, is sort of finding this sweet spot of what's the revenue number that we want to hit before we go out there and fundraise again so that we can warrant a higher valuation. I'm thinking we'll probably do another fundraise end of this year, maybe early next year. That'll kind of be that sweet spot for us of, again, not just like chilling here forever and not being able to grow because we don't have cash to grow, right? But at the
Mm.
same time, really proving ourselves before we go back out to investors.
Is that also because you have more global ambitions? You want to be in more countries? Or is it because you want to launch more products or increase your distribution channels? Like, what is the aspiration? And also, when you do fundraise, I wonder what is the mentality? Is it an IPO mentality? Is it that we want to have a strategic alliance where someone buys us out but gives us control of running? Like, how do you think about all this?
Yeah, I know you
Many
definitely
questions
have to
together.
sort of. No, it's great though. I mean, I was just talking with someone about this recently, and I think the what's very interesting about thinking about an exit plan for Lion Pose is that you really do have to kind of think about what that exit plan is and build towards that as early as now, right? I think that's sort of under discussed, frankly, is sort of what that building towards any type of end goal or end game for a company truly entails. At the end of the day, I have no desire to IPO this. I have every desire to exit it to someone, probably get it acquired by somebody. And knowing that inherently has me making different decisions today than I would if I were trying to build for an IPO, right? So I think that's what I love that more founders are being more kind of openly honest about. I think it sounds a bit silly to be like, I'm building this for an exit, but the truth is I'm building this for an exit.
Yes,
And I
of
think it's
course.
perfectly reasonable to admit that because again, it's going to change so much about the choices that I'm making, the investors I'm taking on, how long I want to be doing this. I have two young kids also, right? I mean, there's only so much that you can kind of put your entire heart and soul into a company for an extended period of time when you have other things going on in your life, right? So I think really just I think so much of that honesty with myself and sort of self-awareness throughout this journey has morphed over time for sure. I mean, you never truly know. It's like when you go to college, right? You don't truly know what you want to major in until maybe your second or third year, especially here in the US. I know that's not the case in India. You usually have to choose a lot earlier, but in
I
the
studied
US
in
you
the
can go to
UK. You
college.
also have to choose a lot earlier. And
Yeah, in the
I've
US
done
you can go
nothing
and
that
just be like, I
relates.
don't know what I want to do. Yeah, yeah.
I've
And
done
so I
nothing
think
that relates to what I studied in LSE, honestly. Uh,
well,
but I,
same. I've done very little to what I studied as well.
yeah,
And so I think that's what's so fun is that we can absolutely still pivot what that ideal exit looks like.
yeah.
But I think knowing at the very least that at some point we probably want to get this thing acquired is helpful enough for us to kind of make the right decisions right now.
That's incredible because in India, of course, that is changing now in India as well. But you kind of get married to a company.
Yeah.
Everything is long
Yeah.
term. How
Yeah.
can you exit a company? You've built your plants, your factories. It just becomes a generational thing. You pass it down.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
changing here as well. But this is very interesting and very honest. How important is community for you, Nisha? I see you do a lot of on ground events as well. A community
Yeah.
building, both online and offline, has become a key factor for women centric brands, all
Yes,
brands really, but
absolutely.
for female led, female centric community build. Like, what is community building and how does it add to your brand?
I think there's an online and offline component, but I'd say for me personally, I really do love the offline. It's just so unique how you can connect with someone that you meet and talk with face to face, devices down, screens off, and really just make that human connection. I think we've done it, with a lot of the creators that we work with, we'll slide into their DMs very often, right? And ask them to help spread the word about Lion Pose. But many times it's not until we meet one of them in person where we really see them fall in love with the brand and our story and, our reason to be in a way that, they never could have really fallen in love with online only. So I think that's where the community aspect of it really resonates with me. I'd say the other component of this is again just who we're building for and what we can do better for them outside of just selling skincare products. And so we've started to do a little bit more of that recently. We just did an incredible partnership actually this month with Saki, which is a New York based organization that supports survivors of domestic violence in the South Asian community here in the US. And so being able to partner, with an organization like that and give a portion of our May sales and proceeds to Saki kind of in combination with AAPI month was something that's, again, completely outside of the world of skincare altogether, but made us feel like what we're doing is not just selling beauty products. We're finding another way for us to make an impact and give back. And I think brands have to think a little bit beyond just narrowly what they're creating and what they're selling. People may feel differently about that. I see online chatter sometimes that's like, stay in your lane, right? You sell skincare, just keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's not about that. At the end of the day, I want to do something that's impacting people more than just what they're putting on their skin. Not that that's not important, but it's just one of many things, right?
And that's actually
Yeah.
how you sustain a brand, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
the
sure.
values. It's not just
Absolutely.
about the packaging or what the storytelling is, but the
Yeah,
values which stay consistent, right? I mean, would you say that's one
absolutely.
of the core sort of sustainability engines for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it has to be. And I think it's really those values and sort of how they intersect even with Madhu's and my personal values that drive a lot of the decisions that we make, right, on a day-to-day basis. So much of it has to be alignment there. And so I think that's naturally why you see a lot of brands and founders values very similar and a lot of founders using their brands as sort of extended platforms for their own value sets too. And I think that's great, honestly.
And it's all kind of
And
tying
again, so,
into each other, right? Now,
yeah,
you're out
absolutely.
there as much as your brand, and it all ties into each other, and your values have to be aligned with your brand values. And that's what you project and put out on
Yeah.
your social media.
Yeah, and I think that there's a fear sometimes amongst founders that, oh, if I kind of publicly announce my personal beliefs and values in connection with the company, that I run the risk of getting canceled or saying something where I'm putting my foot in my mouth or whatever, right? And of course those risks are always there. But I
Yeah.
think the truth of the matter is so many of those personal values, to your point, have already been built into the brand in some way, shape, or form, right? The whole concept of someone feeling like this product was made for someone who looks like me, that's a personal value, right? I want to be able to personally walk into, any retailer and look at the shelf and say, "Oh, I have full complete confidence that these products were tested on someone with my skin tone." That should just be baseline. Like that's just honestly what I feel. If that's not baseline, we're doing it wrong. So I think that's where it's just when they merge so much that way, it just inherently becomes quite the mix between the founder and the brand.
Last two questions. One
Yeah.
is you pivoted from infant formula to a skincare brand. Now,
Yes.
when do you know that you have to pivot, right? Like for someone starting out and out of college and sort of becoming a founder like you with a partner. And by the way, I really do believe in this co-founder story, like doing a business on your own and founding a business and running it and sort of taking on all those risks and all that. I think it's great to have a partner. So, and
Yeah.
especially a partner
Yeah.
that's aligned the way it is for
Yeah.
you. But how do you know that you have to pivot instead of
Yeah.
sort of soldiering on where you are? Because that's one of the entrepreneurship challenges, right? Like, how
It
much do
is.
you persevere and when do you pivot? When do you know something's not going to work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple kind of red flags or signs. One is if you've truly built something that people want, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the Y Combinator way, right? As the first accelerator we went through was very much like build something that people want at the end of the day, right? And if you're going and going and going and people aren't buying into what you've built, then you just haven't built the right solution, right? I think that's a big part of it. And in software, it's a lot easier because you can pivot a lot easier, right? Like you haven't invested in inventory, you haven't invested in R&D, right? You've
Hmm.
probably invested some serious engineering time and money. So I think that's like definitely, some sunk cost there. But it's a lot easier to very quickly be like, this software isn't something that somebody wants to buy versus this physical product isn't something that somebody wants to buy.
Yeah.
So I do think that in the physical goods space, we have it a little bit harder. The second thing that I would say is, there came a time in formula where it just wasn't fun anymore.
Hmm.
It was, and so much of that again came to the fact that we were spending like 50% of our time dealing with regulatory stuff. And we were just like, this is just not what we wanted to do, you know? I'm like, and it's not to say that skincare is not also regulated. Like we have a sunscreen. Sunscreen is heavily regulated in the United States, right? So it's not like we've completely walked away from that, but it's not 50% of my job. So I think that's really where, to a certain degree, you do have to truly love what you do, especially as a founder, because many times you're not paying yourself the first couple of years. You're just doing this because you love it, you know?
Yeah.
And so if the passion isn't there, and usually it's those first couple of years where you end up pivoting, like you're gonna know pretty quickly that what you're doing day in and day out is just not exciting for you. Like maybe move to something else, you know? And just I think it's that self-awareness and honesty of just like I think you have to take the pride out of it. That's really what it is that many times the reason people don't pivot is because of the pride, right? It's that it hurts their pride to say that this thing that they built or this thing that they've been working on the last year just isn't working. And if you can take that pride out of it, then you're just going to be so much faster to fail up, right? Faster to fail upwards and find the thing that actually is bringing you joy and is actually something that people want to buy. So that's my two
Amazing.
cents
That's actually an incredible way to look at it. Fail
there. Yeah.
up, fail upwards,
Yeah. Fail
and
up.
pivot, move on without
Yeah.
without
Absolutely.
ego, without
Yeah.
pride.
Exactly.
As a mom now, you said you've come from hustle, you've seen your parents hustle, um, sort of survive, educate you guys. All that is so important over there. A good university, a good school, the good grades, the GPAs, all of that, the right job, all of that. And
Yeah.
somewhere in this hustle, I find a lot of women and men that I meet there who are South Asian or Indian, who I met in San Francisco, they're sort of like always sort of go, 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 go. Their
Yeah.
life is go, 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 go. And sort
Yeah.
of spreadsheets and, the fastest way to Harvard and the
So
fastest
true.
way to Oxford and that whole thing with their kids as well. And, the right
Yeah.
schools and, you know, all of that. But
Yeah.
when you're second, third generation, the way you are, and you're sort of now reasonably settled financially, you
Yeah.
you're not in the survival mode the way your parents are. What
Yeah.
kind of South Asian are you now? What kind of
There-
values do you now instill in your children? How important is the hustle now for your kids when you've made it or your husband has made it and you're sort of more entrenched into the fabric of society there than
yeah.
having come in as an outsider,
So true. Yeah,
you
so
know?
true. You know what's so funny is I feel like I've started to see this trend amongst second, third generation South Asians, especially who have sort of found themselves now in a very financially stable position, right?
Yeah.
Is that a larger concern now that we have with our kids that our parents did not have with us is actually a concern of humility, right? Like it's now, I mean, like the way that I think about the way I want to raise my kids. I have a 4-year-old girl and an 8-month-old boy. Is that I want them to be raised with the same level of humility that I was. And I just mean that to say that I don't want them to expect that flying in a certain class on the airplane or going to a particular school or any of these things are normal, right? I want them to understand that there are people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds that live in this country, that go to the schools that they go to. I was a public school kid growing up. I want to send my kids to public school, and that's the plan. I think that it's almost that there's more of a focus now being put on how do we make sure our kids aren't growing up just expecting that everything's going to be handed to them? And so it's almost like we're like the opposite of our parents. Our parents raised us essentially giving us everything because they had nothing, right?
Mm.
Now we're in this mindset of we could do the same with our kids, but is it going to spoil them? Right? Like that's where we're getting concerned, right? And so I think it's such an interesting shift in terms of the type A mentality. You know what's funny is I'm so type A at work
Yeah.
that I actually tend to lax up a bit at home, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like my brain is running on full speed, during most of the working day. That by the evening, frankly, most of what I want to do is just cook a really nice. I love to cook. So cooking is my wind down. It's not an obligation to me. It's actually really fun. So I want to cook a really nice meal. I want to enjoy that meal with my family. I want to watch some junk on Netflix. And I just want to
Like the rest of
chill
us.
out, you know?
So you're human like the
Yes.
rest of us.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
I'm like, my brain can't go after a certain hour. Like I'm not a night owl by any means. So, I think that's the true honesty of the situation is that sometimes I just got to shut my brain off and I love it.
Nisha, and I've loved this. This was
Thank
such a
you.
great interview. I could go on and on, but honestly, we really don't have the time now. And it's been over an hour, and this conversation has so educational for me, and it's really opened my eyes. And I love this cross culture exchange
I
of
love it.
ideas and of sort of just life, you know. And I
Yeah,
know
it's
it's a
great.
challenging world, and it's tough for you guys in America as well. It's tough for us here with all the wars and sort of your Trump era. But
Yeah,
I love that South Asians like you are able to sort of navigate that and still feel secure being in that country.
absolutely. And again, so much of it just comes down to staying true to our values, what we believe in, and and surrounding ourselves with people who kind of believe in the same thing, you know? And so I think that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of community. So even community outside of the business sense, community in the personal sense makes such a
Yeah,
big difference.
yeah.
It's
Thank you
wonderful.
so much, Nisha. This was amazing.
Thank you.